Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for being with us. Manufacturing and agriculture, two of the three legs of the Arkansas economy, and both have been battered by the coronavirus outbreak. Yet perhaps the casualty most conspicuous to most Arkansans has been that third leg, hospitality, tourism. The shutdown of hotels, motels, and many restaurants has had an enormous impact, not only on the lives of owners and employees, but on state and local tax revenues. And we'll examine that in just a few moments. First, the role of nonprofit organizations in sustaining Arkansas industry in all its forms, and sustaining individuals as well. Perhaps the newest is the 30-Day Fund, designed to provide grants of up to $3,000 to small businesses. Its co-founder, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is here. And one of the older and larger organizations is the Arkansas Community Foundation, which was endorsed by Governor Hutchinson just months ago as a conduit for Arkansans wishing to aid in pandemic recovery. I want to thank both of our guests for being with us today, but Ms. Sanders, who has an engagement, we're going to go to you first. There is a bit of news involving the foundation the nonprofit which you and your husband have created. It's only a couple of weeks old, but already you've expanded it with an academic connection.
Absolutely. So we just kicked off about 10 days ago, and we've seen an enormous response from around the state and taken in hundreds of applications from all four corners of Arkansas in partnership that we announced yesterday through Arkansas State University. They're helping recruit and train student volunteers to process those applications and make sure that the small businesses applying meet the minimum threshold and are eligible to receive one of our forgivable loans. We ask that a business be owned and operated in the state of Arkansas, be in existence for at least a year, and have between 3 and 30 employees. Again, we've seen a tremendous response just within 10 days, that large number of applicants, but we started giving out grants just 4 days after we opened, and the impact is really remarkable, and I think is changing our lives as much as it is those of the small business owners that we're helping across the state.
Well, according to the announcement, your operation began with $100,000. Where do you stand now, and how much have you dispensed?
So we've more than doubled our fundraising and continue to focus on that every single day. Our goal is to raise as much as possible to help as many small businesses as we can. One of the things I like about our operation is we're completely volunteer driven. We don't have paid staff, which allows us to invest all of that money back into small businesses. By the end of this week, we will have awarded 30 different businesses across the state, and we're going to keep doing that as long as we possibly can, and look forward to giving out more awards every single day next week as well. There
is a certain resemblance, I guess, to, Heifer Project comes to mind, in the sense that the recipients of your grants don't necessarily have to repay, but they pass it along, or they assist another business, or they return it to you for assistance to another business.
We don't ask that they pay this money back. This is a no strings attached gift from the Arkansas 30-Day Fund. What we ask is if they get to a place where they're able, we'd love for them to invest that money back into the organization so we can help another small business across the state. It's not a requirement, but if they have the ability, we hope that they'll do that and join with us in helping other small businesses.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who has another engagement pending, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being a part of the broadcast.
You bet. Thank you, Steve.
And if we can, I will go on to Heather Larkin, who is the CEO, as it were, of the Arkansas Community Foundation. Ms. Larkin, thanks again very much for being part of the broadcast. You have, the foundation created a subsidiary when the epidemic began, a COVID fund, and you've already dispensed rather a lot of money, have you not?
That's correct. On March 17th or 18th, we opened up our first grant phase from the Arkansas COVID-19 Relief Fund. We have granted about 800 grants of $2.6 million since that time in 11 weeks. And we've done that in 2 phases and we continue to try to put more grant money out there for our nonprofit sector.
Well, but yes, generally your funds, though, go to other nonprofits. Am I correct?
That is correct. We do not make grants to individuals or to for-profits. We make grants to not-for-profits, governmental agencies, and things like that.
Well, at a time when Washington is sending, across the country certainly anyway, upwards of $3 trillion, and now there's a great deal of discussion about another governmental aid package. What does this say about the need, what you've been able to do so far through the Community Foundation? What does this say about the role of the nonprofit in a time of high stress such as this?
Yeah. Well, the role of the nonprofit sector cannot be understated. We live in a society with 3 sectors: the government sector, the for-profit or private sector, and the not-for-profit sector. And each one of those sectors has a very vital role. And sometimes we overlap and can work together, but our society cannot actually operate without all 3 of those sectors on full tilt. So as you would expect during this pandemic, our nonprofits have experienced the perfect storm. Demand is skyrocketing and donations are declining as people are under economic stress and can't continue to give at the same level. Our nonprofits are seeing folks that have never had to use the services of a nonprofit coming through their doors and needing so much help and direction and financial support, mental health services, child care. You know, the demand is just skyrocketing. So all the money that's coming into the nonprofit sector, both from the government and the relief packages, there's also the need for private citizens to respond and try to help those nonprofits meet this demand.
Well, yeah, and I was going to ask precisely that, along those lines anyway, at a time when so many Americans are seeing their income shrink or even disappear, Arkansans included. How much more difficult has that made the work of fundraising for any nonprofit?
Yeah, fundraising is very, very difficult right now. So many of our nonprofits, so many live, hand to mouth, just trying to keep the doors open and the services flowing. Others live on events, special events, and you know what that's done. There are no events right now. So the revenue streams, those fundraising revenue streams are just almost shut down. Now, on the other hand, we do live in a very generous state, and Arkansans are digging deep. People are very, very giving, and they're giving what they can. So at the time when it is really tough for the nonprofit sector, the bright spot in all of this is that you see amazing stories where people give into this Arkansas COVID-19 Relief Fund that the Community Foundation has established. We have received $3.4 million in gifts since March 16th or so. Just amazing generosity. And then to hear Sarah talk about what they're doing with their nonprofit and the money and the support that's coming in, it just shows how, what kind of people we call our neighbors in this state.
All right, Heather Larkin, thanks very much for being with us, and good luck with the foundation fundraising. And we'll be right back. And we're back. And we're sitting down again in restaurants. Some of us, some of them. Takeout and home cooking, all well and good, but maybe growing a bit stale. Yet consumer inconvenience pales against the medical necessity of social distancing and the impact the retail shutdown has had on thousands of Arkansas businesses and workers in the hospitality and tourism sector, not to mention the millions in lost revenue. So now a staged reopening, how to try to make up for lost time. Joining us, Stacey Hurst, Secretary of the State Department of Parks and Tourism. Montine McNulty is Executive Director of the Arkansas Hospitality Association. And Gretchen Hall of the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thanks to all three of you for being with us. Ms. McNulty, let's start with you if we can. Can we quantify what tourism hospitality has lost in the first almost 5 months of this year?
Well, we have lost a lot, and the April report showed that we took the biggest hit in the state. We had 41,000 Arkansans that went on unemployment. So we led the state in unemployment, and we hope that will change.
Gretchen Hall, the impact in Little Rock, Arkansas's biggest convention city.
Yeah, so for the restaurant industry, research is projecting restaurant sales to be down about $110 million this year due to coronavirus. And then in the lodging industry in Little Rock, another $34 million loss.
We're in the neighborhood there of $200 million just in Pulaski County, am I correct? Or Little Rock, correct?
That's correct.
That's a lot of tax revenue loss, Secretary Hurst.
It is indeed, and I don't think there's any debate that the travel and tourism industry and the hospitality industry have been the hardest hit sector of the economy during this pandemic. We just got our 2% numbers, which are based on the tourism trade, largely lodging, and we are looking at about a 35% decrease in 2% tax based on the month of March compared to March of 2019. So there's no doubt that it's had a pretty devastating impact on collections.
Well, and that 2%, of course, is dedicated.
It is. It's dedicated to promoting tourism in the state of Arkansas. And we've seen an increase year over year for the past 10 years in the 2% tax. This year, we've had a really good year thus far, up until March, but we're anticipating maybe even an 85% decrease for April. So we're just hoping to hold on for this year and hopefully come back strong in 2021.
Well, with so much assistance coming down from trillions, in fact, coming down to all 50 states, but coming from Washington, Arkansas share well over $1 billion, I believe. How much difference has that made, Ms. McNulty?
Well, the 1.1 billion that the state got is being used for mostly health care and other purposes. Our industry has been a recipient of what other businesses gotten, opening up in some of the programs to get, but it's not enough. We need more support. And as we speak, the House is considering changes to the federal PPP bill that will really help if that gets through.
Ms. Hall, same question.
Yeah, so we're seeing the same situation. A lot of our small businesses on the restaurant and even the hotel side were able to utilize some of those programs. But as Montine mentioned, the travel and tourism industry has just been hit extremely hard. And a lot of our businesses are saying that they still need additional support because the recovery efforts are obviously a slow process.
Secretary Hurst, we now have a phase in the governor's directives allowing more and more on a graduated basis, more and more economic activity, including parks. A key phrase that's emerged over the last months is congregate settings. Now, there's been a lot of publicity, a lot of news coverage about people gathering in large numbers, swimming pools, Lake of the Ozarks. You've seen all this. Is there concern there that the state cannot adequately cope with that?
Well, there's always a concern, certainly, and we're going to have to all assume personal responsibility for being smart, taking precautions to navigate this the spread of the virus. I will use as an example our Arkansas State Parks. We had at the end of March 40,000 people on a beautiful Sunday attend our parks, and they were just too crowded. Since then, we have empowered our park rangers and our uniformed staff to monitor activity and to encourage our visitors to be careful. So in some settings, we simply can't police it all. But I think the message is that we all have to learn to live with this virus and be careful, take those precautions that we all know, wear a mask where needed, keep social distance at all times, and just to be really smart so we can avoid another peak and continue to reopen safely.
Back to the matter of federal aid. It's been argued in the General Assembly and Congress in both public and private sectors that in some instances the assistance to the states, payrolls, have been overly generous, and that employees are very reluctant to return to work because they simply make more money than they were by staying home than they were. Ms. McNulty, let me go to you first on that.
Yes, that has had an impact. It's harder to get the employees back, and actually the bill should have been to bring them back the choice to bring them back at a later date, and hopefully that will be accomplished. But it's really a hard thing. It wasn't designed for our industry.
Gretchen Hall.
Yes.
So the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, we operate several of the large public venues in Little Rock, and unfortunately we did have to furlough a significant number of our staff, and that additional unemployment stimulus has been very beneficial for them. We are in a little different situation where we're not in a position to bring back our staff yet, and so we haven't had that issue of trying to recall employees at this time.
Well, your staff, sure, but I mean, you interface with the hospitality industry across, I mean, the hotels, the motels, restaurants, bars, taverns, nightclubs.
Sure.
What's been the response that you've picked up?
And we're hearing the same as Montine. Now, many of our restaurants have chosen to continue to only provide takeout and curbside. There have been a number of restaurants that have reopened for dining and in-dining service. And so it's kind of a mixed bag of being able to balance that safety and precautions with bringing back employees that are willing to come back into the work environment.
I would go now to Stacey Hurst to see if you've got a comment on that. The governor, your boss, has commented on that as well.
Well, I think the federal funding has been of great help to a number of businesses, small businesses to large businesses. I do think there are improvements that could be made, and hopefully Congress will put those in place. As it regards the $1.25 billion that the state has received, I think the CARES Committee continues to look at how to best use that. The Ready for Business grant is now going out. I think that has been well received and needed across the state of Arkansas. And we continue to look at ways that we can be of assistance to businesses that are struggling. We have just seen numbers that within the hospitality and travel sector, I think the rate of employment is right at 35% right now, of unemployment is right at 35% right now, which is by far the hardest hit sector of the economy again. So it's something that we need to really take a look at, because in order to rebound well within the tourism and travel industry, we have to help these businesses as much as we possibly can in Arkansas.
Well, one way, according to some business lobbies, is to grant some employers tort liability immunity from litigation arising from coronavirus among their employees. That's had a natural pushback from the opposite, or from labor, obviously. Ms. McNulty, are you behind? Is your organization going to get behind that? My last understanding is the administration, Mr. Hutchinson, has not made a decision yet.
Well, it would be a great relief, because and some states have acted on that already, and maybe we can follow their example. But it's something that needs to be considered anyway.
Gretchen Hall?
Sure. Liability with all of these new changes is obviously our small businesses are very concerned about that. And so it doesn't necessarily affect our individual organization. We're a government agency, but for all of our industry partners in the private sector, they're certainly concerned about liability factors moving forward in this kind of new normal.
Well, of course, many workers' organizations argue that such an indemnification would essentially release employers from any significant responsibility toward their employees in a time of pandemic. Secretary Hurst, or any of you want to address that? That it relieves business employers of their responsibilities.
Well, and I think it certainly needs to be carefully constructed, but debated fully. But it would provide great relief, not just to large businesses, but to Main Street businesses, small businesses across the state of Arkansas. I've even heard concern expressed from some of the faith-based organizations that I've worked with on the Economic Recovery Task Force. So I think it's a very timely issue, and it ought to be fully discussed and debated at the legislative level in Arkansas.
I can tell you from the employer's point of view, their first priority has been the safety of their employees and also that they've been taken care of. They've said that loud and clear.
Well, I mean, any business, the first obligation is to remain in business, is it not?
Well, it is, but you have to balance that with health and safety too.
I searched for some good economic news, and the only one I could find, the only item I could find was that the rate of applications nationwide for unemployment benefits is starting to tick down a bit. So my question is, when the dust finally settles, if it settles, how many businesses that are closed, how many businesses in tourism, hospitality, are we likely to lose? It seems obvious that, well, a great many have already announced that they simply can't come back.
Yes.
Montine, we'll begin with
you. We did a survey and it said 3% would never reopen. There's a survey being conducted right now, and we'll see how that comes back. But there are a number of businesses that won't survive this.
Gretchen Hall, the feedback that you're picking up.
Sure. During this pandemic, we've had 8 hotel properties that temporarily closed. We are anticipating all of those to return to open status. And so at this point, we're not expecting to lose any lodging establishments. That's a little different on the restaurant side. So we have well over 500 restaurants in Little Rock, and several have already made public announcements that they will be closing permanently. There are numerous restaurants that have closed temporarily during this, and we do anticipate that some of those will not be able to survive, and really the rate of return to business will be the determining factor there.
Well, as it is for the time being, they are having to, all establishments are having to socially distance their customers, tables, bar stools 6 feet apart, etc., everyone masked. Can they make it on that for the time being?
You know, some can and some can't, and that's why some have chosen to not reopen for in-service dining. Some have chosen not to reopen for safety concerns. But they all have options, and there have been several that have done that in a very responsible way, and they are being able to manage. They have larger properties, and so the 33% capacity is enough for them to cover their expenses and pay their staff and bring them back on board. And many are really working the curbside and the takeout delivery options and being able to get by. There's, obviously a tremendous loss in revenue, and that will continue for a while, but we've seen a lot of community support. There's been a lot of support from our residents and also businesses supporting each other during this time.
Well, Secretary Hurst, I'll give you the last word. Your situation, the state situation, a little bit different than private enterprise, but you're still under stress.
Yes, well, and as it regards our, particularly our restaurants, and I'm particularly worried about the lodges, of course, in Arkansas. They contribute so much to our travel industry. The restaurants seem to have adapted. The lodges are really struggling. Many are, at 85% below their normal occupancies. I can report that at our Arkansas State Parks, as we have gradually reopened them to overnight visitors, we've seen a really strong response from the public. For Memorial Day weekend, for example, we were at about 55% occupancy at our lodges across the system. We were at 75% occupancy in our cabins, and camping was at about 65%. So I think there is a desire to return to getting out a little bit, to traveling. And our, at least our initial research indicates that that's where people are going to travel first. They're in a rather nearby to their home, but they want to get out. And we're being careful to take all the precautions necessary to keep not just our staff safe, but our visitors safe. So hopefully over the next few weeks, we won't see a continued increase, and we'll be able to ease back into more travel in the state of Arkansas.
Got to end it there. We're out of time. Secretary Hurst, Montine McNulty, Gretchen Hall, thank you all for being with us. And we'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.